Hello, I'm Matt Haworth from Reason Digital and Impact Reporting. About 26 years ago was when I got my first computer, and that computer actually came out of a skip outside my mum's place of work where she worked as an accountant. And I remember switching it on for the first time, and on this computer was spreadsheet upon spreadsheet in a piece of software called Lotus 123, which some of you might be unfortunate enough to remember. Clearly no one had put together the words data and security at that point. But on that was the accounts for this firm. And my mum's job at the time was to corral all this financial information together out of various people, making phone calls, chasing up documents, and be the person to key it into a spreadsheet in time for reporting deadlines. Fast forward to today, I now work in digital social innovation, and 3 years ago I led a government-funded research and development project into the measurement of social value, where my team interviewed 125 companies or appraised their annual reports. And we found a lot of companies are really struggling to record their social value in a particularly effective or efficient way. And that social value measurement has actually got a lot in common with the accountancy practices of about 25 years ago, where everybody is doing their best to fudge it together in spreadsheets and chasing up a lot of information from across an organization. And I think this is a real shame because social value and the work that procurement specialists, the work that commissioners and the work that companies do has such a great potential to improve so many lives and so many communities over the next few years. Yet I believe that measurement is somewhat standing in the way of that. I believe that what isn't measured properly can never be managed properly. And approaches to measurement, both from companies and from commissioners, are not yet mature. So I've been thinking a lot about, after that research and in my work with various companies, what would mature measurement look like? What would a socially valuable mature measurement framework look like? And I wanted to share with you just 7 kind of highlights from that really to get you thinking. So the first principle of that would be that we would move away from email and spreadsheets pretty quickly. We don't fudge together our accounts or our project management together with spreadsheets at the last minute, and we shouldn't do it for social value either. This data is not only really important in improving people's lives, but it's also having a really key influence on who is being awarded what contracts and what projects are actually happening. So we should treat it with a little bit more respect than trying to rush it out the door 2 weeks before the annual impact report is due, which is a common practice even in some of the best companies that we've seen. I think one of the things that holds up improvements in this process really is a wait for standardization. And one thing I'd encourage you to do is really stop waiting for the magic wand of standardization. What I mean by standardization is that somebody comes out with some magic, consistent way of doing all this stuff. And you might be promising yourself, you know, the second that happens, we'll look into this and we'll engage with this. But actually, you know, this information is required right now. It's the basis of procurement decisions right now. And if you wait for that, it will be a very chicken and egg situation. I believe standardization will be driven by people experimenting and using and doing this stuff, and not necessarily something that will be granted to us upon high. The next thing I would recommend is that we really start to engage our whole workforce. So rather than this be the job that is lumbered perhaps with a marketing manager or a bid manager, that this is something that is not just the preserve of one person who's sticking things in one spreadsheet. Things can be captured across the workforce. Socially valuable activity occurs across a business, both in the office and outside the office. And if we can empower those individuals actually doing it to record it at the time that they're doing it, we're going to capture so much more. What we found in our research is that a really significant amount of socially valuable activity is just simply lost to the sands of time because it's not noted down at the right moment. And you know, who is going to remember when they receive a phone call, what they were up to 10 months ago that might have some social value? It's just not realistic. It's also worth maybe considering just how much information about activity already exists in systems within your organization. And if that can be drawn in, then you know, that's capture that you're doing for free without needing to burden even a single individual in the workforce. I would say as well that it's really important that all you require of these individuals in the workforce is the inputs. we interviewed some quite sophisticated companies that were actually asking people that were doing work on the ground, you know, perhaps somebody working in a cafeteria was going and volunteering to paint a community centre, what the LM3 economic value of that activity is. And frankly, even some, you know, economists would struggle to just come up with that off the top of their head. So, so it's little wonder that data wasn't really forthcoming. But, you know, we can, using technology, make big strides in automating that. And I would really recommend that you focus on capturing the raw input data from the workforce and then leave it to technology to convert that into outputs and outcomes, you know, under the supervision of economists and consultants that could load those proxies in. You know, if we just take a real example of the difference this could make. Say your job is to pull together this impact report. You know, maybe that lands on your desk a month before it's due and you start to pick it up. You find that perhaps there's a commitment for everybody in the business to volunteer for 1 hour. And you find, you know, with a few phone calls and some spreadsheet maths that around about 20% of the workforce has done that, maybe around 2,000 hours have been volunteered. And that is a raw input, and that is not a very powerful number, 2,000 volunteering hours. What is really powerful is the outcomes of that volunteering and the social value that creates. But say you're not using technology, you're not quite sure about that, you might simply choose to apply a rate of £20 an hour to that time because that's what it might have cost those charities or community groups to pay for that time instead. That's a generation of £40,000 worth of social value, and that's probably not going to do too well on that bid that you're working on. However, if we looked at that and as a more mature business, we decided that actually a lot of that volunteering time is going into mentoring our apprentices, and we have 100 level 2 apprentices that are within our business and perhaps within our supply chain that we're mentoring. If we look at the economic value of that alone, factoring in dropout rates, that will be £1.2 million worth of social value. So it's easy to see how a little bit of analysis and this kind of separation between capturing the inputs on the ground and automatically converting that into the outputs and outcomes can make a powerful difference to the social value that you can report. One thing to consider as part of that really is that socially valuable activity doesn't just exist within this kind of special category of kind of added value or side projects that your organization might do. Quite a lot of core business activity probably covers that, from perhaps that finance admin that you brought in under an apprenticeship in the accounts team, to perhaps the considerate construction scheme that you're complying with on your building sites as a matter of course if you're a construction company. There could be a lot of social value if that was being more effectively captured, but that's not something that somebody's going to come up with on a telephone call about what kind of volunteering or fundraising or other activities been done at the end of the year. Another point there really is, and another key principle, is that there's probably so much social value that is just hiding in your supply chain. You're probably responsible for a huge amount of what your supply chain is doing in terms of its employment and its own socially valuable activities. There could well be millions of pounds worth of social value hiding in that supply chain if you only ask. And again, you know, this is where technology can play a role because it's very difficult to coordinate gathering data from hundreds or potentially thousands of supply chain partners. But technology can automate that process, and the most mature businesses capturing their social value are just starting to do that now. So that's really going to be a trend in the coming year. What all this would enable is real-time reporting. You know, you wouldn't wait until the end of the year to look at your accounts and go, oh, we didn't make any money this year, that's a shame. You know, you'd be looking at that, you know, I hope kind of, if not quarterly, then monthly. Certainly modern accountancy packages like Xero or QuickBooks make it possible to see your financial position on a day-to-day or even hour-to-hour position. And this is what technology makes possible. And I believe that if we made that possible with social value, we'd be much more able to manage this process and ensure throughout the year that we had the right mix of programs and activity to deliver our social value goals. And of course, not just benefit our communities and the people within them, but also make sure that our companies were competitive in procurement, particularly under the Social Value Act. So what are we doing around this? Just briefly to mention, a group of companies have decided to work with Reason Digital on our impact project to trailblaze a new way to do this stuff, a better way to do this stuff than simply corralling things together over emails and spreadsheets at the last minute. We've been working with them to co-design a piece of technology which is now in use across many of their businesses to ensure that they can apply these principles in practice. Obviously, a lot of these techniques can be very onerous, but that's where technology can come in to automate those, and that tool is called impact. I'll just leave you with one thought, which is if you were to commission, let's say, a construction project from a supplier or a prime contractor, you wouldn't say to them, just build me a £15 million school. Don't really care, you know, what level of education it is, how many students it can hold, really where you put it. Just spend 15 million quid on it, whatever you want from there. And you wouldn't let them then build that school with no supervision, and then in 6 months' time, perhaps, give them a phone call and ask if that school got built. Did the school get built? And the other end of the line, the person from the prime contractor might say, well, I can't really tell you that. Don't have the data to hand, but I have managed to dig out some receipts for an awful lot of bricks. And it looks like we might have enough bricks to have built that school. So yeah, I think we met our obligations there. That sounds absolutely crazy, but that's exactly what happens in so many contracts and with so many companies with social value. And I think we could do better and really seize this opportunity for technology to really improve this process. And that's what I've been working on. Thank you very much.